Ford Nolan didn't expect to be ankle-deep in weeds at 7 in the morning, gripping a rusted rake like his life depended on it, but he needed the distraction. Anything to keep his mind off the eviction notice taped to his apartment door and the peanut butter sandwiches he was stretching into dinner for the third night in a row for his 6-year-old son, Bray. The house he stood in front of was impossible to ignore: white columns, black shutters, and a wraparound porch that looked like it belonged in a magazine. He passed it every day on his walk to the bus stop after dropping Bray off at school. But today, the overgrown lawn, scattered leaves, and a broken sprinkler head stood out like a sore thumb. He didn't see a gardener, no maintenance van, no signs of life. A voice in his head whispered, "Ask if they need help. Maybe they'll pay." But when no one answered the doorbell, Ford did something stupid. He got to work anyway. 2 hours later, sweat dripping down his back and dirt smeared across his flannel, he was halfway through trimming the hedges when a sharp voice called out from behind him. "Excuse me? What exactly are you doing?" He turned fast, nearly tripping over the hedge trimmer cord. Standing on the porch was a woman in black slacks and a crisp white blouse, her dark curls pulled into a sleek ponytail. She looked expensive and annoyed. Ford wiped his hands on his jeans. "I noticed the yard hadn't been touched in a while. Thought I'd help. Free of charge." Her brows lifted. "You're doing landscaping? For free? On a stranger's property?" He gave a crooked smile. "Yeah, weird, I know. I walk by here every day, and it looked like someone could use the help." She stared at him for a long beat. Then unexpectedly, her expression softened. "You're not trying to sell me anything?" "No, ma'am." Her eyes flicked down to his calloused hands and the hole in his work boot. "You always do this?" He shrugged. "Only when I can't afford therapy." She let out a laugh, sharp and sudden, like she hadn't done it in a while. "I'm Thea Sullivan," she said. "I just moved in 3 weeks ago. Things have been hectic." "Ford Nolan." "Nice to meet you," he said, brushing his palm on his jeans before offering it. She hesitated just for a blink, then shook it. "Well, Ford Nolan," she said, glancing around her newly trimmed hedges, "I was about to grab lunch. Would you like to join me?" He blinked. I don't want to impose, ma'am. It's Thea, and I don't offer things I don't mean." He followed her inside, where everything smelled like lemon cleaner and new furniture. The kitchen was sleek marble countertops, matte black appliances, and a dining table that looked like it had never been used. She pulled out 2 plates and opened the fridge. "Chicken salad okay? Sounds like a feast." They sat across from each other, eating quietly for a moment until she asked, "Do you always help people you don't know?" He nodded. "I try. Been on the other side of things too many times. Sometimes kindness just shows up when you need it most." She looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. "Do you have kids?" "Yeah. My son, Bray. He's 6. Loves dinosaurs, hates broccoli, and thinks I'm a superhero, though I don't know how long that'll last." He chuckled. "That's sweet," she murmured, her tone unreadable. "Where's his mom?" "Left when he was 2," Ford said simply. "It's been me and Bray ever since." Thea leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on him like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. "You're a good dad." Ford raised a brow. "You just met me. I don't say things I don't mean either." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Over the next few days, Ford kept coming back. He trimmed, planted, fixed the broken sprinkler. Thea never asked him to, but she always came outside with lemonade or lunch, claiming she hated eating alone. He learned she worked long hours, something in finance, she said vaguely, and had recently moved from New York after a rough breakup. "I needed space. Quiet. This house seemed like a good place to figure things out," she'd said one afternoon as they sat side by side on the porch steps. "You picked a good one," he replied. "It's peaceful here." She looked at him, then not just looked, but really looked, and something passed between them. Something unspoken but heavy. That night, Ford tucked Bray into bed and stared at the ceiling long after his son fell asleep. He couldn't stop thinking about her. About the way she laughed when he said something dumb. The way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. The way talking to her made him forget, just for a while, how hard things were. The next morning, he showed up with a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked along the roadside. Thea opened the door in jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair down for the first time. "Morning," he said, handing her the flowers. She blinked. "Are these for me?" "Well, they're not for Bray," he teased. Her laugh was soft this time. She reached out and touched the petals, then looked up at him. "You really are something else, Ford Nolan." He scratched the back of his neck. I was hoping maybe I could take you out sometime. Not just lunch in your kitchen. A real dinner. I mean, if you're okay with that. She tilted her head. I thought you said you couldn't afford therapy. I can't, he said. But I can afford one dinner. Might skip lunch for a few days, but I think you're worth it. Thea smiled, and this time, it reached her eyes. You don't have to skip meals. I'll pick the place. Ford grinned. Deal. They didn't know it yet, but that dinner would change everything. The Italian restaurant she chose was tucked between a wine bar and an art gallery in the historic district, all warm amber lighting and soft jazz seeping through the walls. Ford had never stepped foot in a place like it. The waiter wore a tie clip. The menu didn't have prices. His collar itched like it was warning him he didn't belong. But when Thea walked through the entrance in a navy silk blouse and tailored trousers, everything else faded. You clean up nice, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. I almost asked the clerk if I had to pay extra just to try the blazer on, he said, tugging at the sleeve. Didn't expect to be dining somewhere with chandeliers. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her knuckles. I like seeing you out of the flannel. You have shoulders. Ford cleared his throat and busied himself with the menu, though he had no idea what half the food was. Tell me something about you, Thea. Something real. She didn't flinch. When I was 16, I got kicked out of math class for correcting the teacher too many times. Let me guess. You were right. Every time, she said with a shrug. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I just hate inefficiency. That sounds about right, he said, watching the candlelight reflect off her cheekbones. You probably run your life like a spreadsheet. You're not far off, she said, reaching for the wine the waiter had just poured. But I didn't always. I used to be impulsive. Wild, even. That part of me got buried when I started building my company. Ford blinked. Company? She hesitated. I own a private equity firm. Or rather, I co-founded one. My partner handles the New York side now. He set down his glass. That's not finance. That's big finance. I didn't bring it up before because I didn't want you to treat me like a bank vault. I wouldn't, he said quickly. That's not who I am. I know, she replied. That's why I invited you. Dinner passed in a blur of slow laughter and shared bites of tiramisu. By the time they stepped outside, the street lamps had flickered on and distant music floated from the park nearby. Walk with me, she asked. He nodded, and they strolled in silence past closed boutiques and ivy-wrapped railings. Thea paused at a fountain, her hands clasped behind her back. I was engaged once, she said suddenly. 4 years ago. Ford glanced at her. What happened? He was charming. Cunning. Said everything right. But he wanted a trophy, not a partner. When my business started gaining traction, he told me I needed to slow down, be softer. Smaller. She turned to him. I steady. I walked away the next day. Sold the ring. Bought my first office. He let out a low exhale. That's guts. I don't regret it, she said. But sometimes I wonder if I lost the part of me that believed in this. She gestured between them. You didn't lose it, Ford said. You just stopped showing it to people who didn't deserve it. Thea looked up at him, lips parted like she wanted to say something but couldn't. He stepped closer, testing the space. Can I see you again? She nodded. You can see me tomorrow. They shared a quiet goodbye outside the restaurant, and Ford walked to the bus stop with his hands in his pockets and his heart thudding like it had forgotten how to settle. The next afternoon, Thea showed up outside the elementary school parking lot in a silver car with leather seats and a scent that reminded him of a high-end department store. I thought I'd pick you up, she said casually. And meet Bray. Ford opened the back door. Hey, buddy. This is my friend Thea. Bray tilted his head. Is she a teacher? Nope, Thea replied. But I do like books and snacks. Within minutes, she had Bray giggling in the back seat with tales of her childhood pet ferret, who once escaped into a neighbor's wedding reception. Ford watched from the passenger seat, his chest tightening. She wasn't faking it. She didn't talk down to Bray or pretend interest. She meant it. They ended up at a small outdoor fair on the edge of town. Bray raced from booth to booth with cotton candy in hand, while Ford and Thea trailed behind, sharing glances and trading dry commentary about the funnel cake judging panel. I've never done anything like this, she admitted as they waited for Bray at the ring toss. Just wandered around. Been part of something ordinary. He turned to her. You're allowed. You don't have to earn it. Later that evening, after Bray had fallen asleep in the car and Thea insisted on driving them home, Ford lingered outside his apartment building with her. I should get him inside, he said quietly. She nodded, then reached into her coat pocket. This is for you. He unfolded the paper. It was a flyer. A local business pitch event. Grand prize, $20,000 in startup funding. I know you've got something in you, she said. You're sharp. You work harder than most people I've met in boardrooms. His brow furrowed. You think I should enter this? I know you should, she said. And I'll be there. I want to see what you build. He looked at her. The way her confidence didn't come from arrogance, but from something steadier. Something rooted. I won't let you down. You haven't yet. She drove off, leaving the scent of her perfume in the air, and the flyer crumpled slightly in his hand. Ford carried Bray inside, laid him gently on the bed without waking him, and sat at the kitchen table under the flickering overhead bulb. He unfolded the flyer again. He didn't know what he'd pitch. He didn't have a polished plan or a suit that fit quite right. But he had something better. He had a reason. The folding table in the community center gym wobbled under the weight of Ford's nerves. He adjusted the poster board he'd printed at the library, the corners curling slightly in the heat of the overhead lights. Around him, other contestants were setting up glossy displays and throwing around words like scale and multi-channel integration. A woman to his left had a tablet looping a promotional video. The guy on his right had matching branded polos for his non-existent team. Ford had a sketchbook, a toolbox, and a 10-year-old dream he hadn't dared say aloud until now. A pair of judges strolled toward him, clipboards in hand. One wore horn-rimmed glasses and a tight-lipped expression. The other tapped a pen against her chin, scanning his display. Ford Nolan, the man asked. Yes, sir. You're proposing a mobile repair service? Not just repairs, Ford said. Restorations. For people who can't afford to replace things. I've been fixing appliances, furniture, and tools for years. Most folks toss things that could last another decade with a little work. The woman raised a brow. And your plan for scalability? It starts small. One van, local service. I've already got a waiting list from people in my neighborhood. Long term, I want to train others vets, folks who've been laid off, single parents like me. Teach them the trade. Give them a way to make a living fixing instead of throwing away. The man scribbled something on his clipboard. Interesting premise. We'll be in touch. They moved on. Ford released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and leaned against the table, rubbing the back of his neck. You didn't stutter once. He turned. Thea stood there in a charcoal trench coat, a leather bag over her shoulder, and pride in her eyes that didn't need saying. You came, he said. I said I would. I didn't think it would be this. Official. Some of these people have marketing budgets. She stepped closer, her gaze sweeping over his setup. They might have budgets, but they don't have heart, or a plan that actually helps people. He opened his mouth to thank her, but she raised a hand. Don't thank me. Just promise me this win or lose. You keep going. You build this thing. Because it matters. He nodded once, firmly. I will. She looked like she wanted to say more, but didn't. Instead, she slid a folded envelope onto the table and walked away, heels clicking on the scuffed gym floor. Back home, Ford waited until Bray was occupied with a science kit from the library before opening the envelope. Inside was a check. $5,000. Made out to him. No note. Just her signature in the corner. He stared at it for a long time, then tucked it back into the envelope and placed it on top of the fridge where Bray couldn't reach. He would call her. Not now, but soon. 2 days later, he got the email. Runner-up. No funding. He stared at the screen, jaw tight. He'd known it was a long shot, but he'd let himself hope, and that made the disappointment sting harder. He didn't tell Bray. Instead, he took his son biking through the park and let him chatter about volcanoes and magnets. But that night, after Bray had fallen asleep on the couch, Ford stood in the kitchen with the envelope in his hand. He didn't want her money. Not like this. He walked to her house the next morning with the envelope in his pocket and his heart pounding like it was trying to outrun him. She answered the door in leggings and a faded hoodie, her hair twisted up messily, phone in hand. Hey, she said, surprised. I need to talk to you, he said. She stepped aside, and he followed her into the kitchen where the smell of cinnamon hung in the air. Is something wrong? She asked, setting her phone down. He pulled out the envelope and held it out. I can't take this. Her brows drew together. Why not? Because it changes things. I want to build something, Thea. On my own. I don't want to blur lines with you. It's not charity. It's belief. I know, but I need to earn it. If I ever do take your help, It has to be because I'm ready, not because I failed. She studied him for a moment. Then she reached out slowly and took the envelope back. I respect that, she said quietly. Ford let out a breath. Thank you. They stood there in silence for a beat. I'm not used to people saying no to me, she admitted. I'm not used to people betting on me, he replied. Then her expression shifted, softening with something deeper. Come with me tonight. Where? Just be ready at 6. Where's something nice? Not restaurant with no prices nice. Just nice. He raised a brow, but nodded. That evening, she picked him and Bray up in a sleek SUV with a backseat full of snacks and a playlist of Bray's favorite songs already queued. They drove out of town, past the highway and into the hills, where the city lights gave way to trees and winding roads. Eventually, they pulled into a long gravel driveway leading to a barn strung with fairy lights and music floating from open windows. What is this? Ford asked. My friend owns the property, Thea said as she parked. They host community nights. Bonfires, food trucks, music. I thought maybe we could just be. Bray was already unbuckling himself, eyes wide at the sight of roasting marshmallows and kids playing tag under the stars. Ford followed Thea across the lawn, his fingers brushing hers once, then again, until she took his hand. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Later, as Bray dozed on a hay bale and the night wore thin, Ford turned to her. I've never felt like this before. She looked at him, the firelight catching the curve of her jaw. Like what? Like I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like something good might actually last. She didn't say anything right away. Then she leaned in and kissed him soft, steady, certain. When they pulled apart, she whispered, it will. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself believe it. Rain came down in sheets, soft at first, then heavy enough to blur the windshield as Ford eased the borrowed van into park. He looked out at the storefront vacant, dusty, and tucked between a shuttered bakery and a pawn shop. Thea leaned forward in the passenger seat, peering through the glass. This is it. Yeah, he said, shutting off the engine. I talked to the owner last week. He's willing to lease it cheap if I handle the repairs myself. She turned to him. You're actually doing it. He nodded. I've got a name. Nolan Fix and Restore. I filed the paperwork yesterday. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak right away. I didn't want to say anything until it was real, he added. I used the last of my savings for the deposit. He glanced at her, then away. And I turned in that check you gave me. They're holding it as collateral to finance the van. She reached for his hand. I'm proud of you. The words hit harder than he expected. He looked down at their joined hands, her fingers cool against his calloused ones. I wouldn't have gotten here without you. You would have found a way, she said. I just gave you a reason to move faster. They stepped out into the rain, and he unlocked the door to the shop. The inside was a mess: old tile, broken shelves, wiring that needed replacing. But Ford saw potential. He saw it in the back wall where he'd build the workshop, in the front window where he'd hang a sign, and in the corner where Bray could sit with his books after school. He turned to Thea. You really think people will come? I think people trust you, she said. You don't promise what you can't deliver. That's rare. He reached for a tarp in the back and unfurled it over a stack of old chairs. I want this place to be more than just a business. I want it to be something Bray can be proud of. He already is, she said. He paused. He told me last night he wants to be a fixer like me when he grows up. Thea smiled, the kind that flickered across her face like she didn't mean to let it show. Then you're already winning. Later that week, after 3 straight days of rewiring outlets and scrubbing rust from pipes, Ford walked into the house with dirt under his nails and the beginnings of a plan for a grand opening. Bray came running down the hallway. Dad, Thea's here. Ford turned just in time to see her step into the living room, holding a box with a bright orange ribbon on top. I brought something, she said, setting it on the table. Inside was a miniature workbench, polished wood, fitted with tiny drawers, and a plaque on the front that read, Bray Nolan, Junior Fixer. Ford looked from the gift to her. You didn't have to. I wanted to, she said. He's part of this too. Bray was already beside it, tracing the edges of the drawer with reverence. It's mine. Thea crouched beside him. All yours. Ford watched them, something tightening in his chest, not worry or fear, but something heavier. Hope, maybe. He waited until Bray had gone to bed before walking Thea to the door. I've been thinking, he said. Once I get the shop up and running, I want you to come with me to the ribbon cutting. She tilted her head. As what? As the reason I started. Her voice dropped. That's a big thing to say. I mean it. She stepped closer. Are you sure this is what you want? It's not just the shop. It's me. My world's complicated. It doesn't slow down. I don't need it to, he said. I've built my life around one rule: show up. For Bray. For the people I care about. And I'll do the same for you. She looked at him then with something new in her expression, not surprise or admiration, but relief. You mean that? I've never said anything I meant more. She kissed him there in the doorway, slow and certain, as the street lamp outside flickered against the window. Weeks passed. The shop opened. Slowly, customers came, first neighbors, then referrals, then strangers who'd heard about the man with the steady hands who didn't charge more than he needed. Ford worked long hours, but Bray came by after school every day, doing homework in the back office or handing his dad tools with exaggerated seriousness. Thea was there every Friday, sometimes with lunch, sometimes just to sit and listen as Ford explained how he'd re-threaded a stripped screw or restored a rusted sewing machine. One Friday, she showed up with a man in a slate gray suit and a tablet. This is Marcus, she said. He runs the Community Development Fund. I told him about your idea to train new hires. Ford wiped his hands on a rag. I haven't started anything formal yet. You don't have to, Marcus said. We've seen the numbers and the impact. If you're willing, we'd like to offer you a matching grant to expand. Ford blinked. You're serious? Completely, Marcus replied. What you're doing here, it matters. When they left, Ford sat on the edge of the counter, staring at the empty work order clipboard. Thea leaned beside him. Still think this isn't real? I don't know what to say. Then let me. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box. He froze. Thea, open it. Inside was a silver key on a slim chain. It's to my place, she said. You and Bray, if you want it. I know we've been circling around this, but I don't want to circle anymore. He closed the box and looked at her, his voice rough. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. That night, as Bray fell asleep in a new room with dinosaur sheets and a bookshelf already half filled, Ford stood in the doorway watching him. Thea came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. I never thought I'd have this, he said softly. Neither did I, she replied. But I think we both deserved it. He turned, kissed her forehead, and whispered, thank you. For seeing me. For choosing us. She looked up at him. You didn't just fix things, Ford. You built something beautiful. And with her hand in his, the lights low, and the quiet hum of a life finally falling into place, Ford Nolan realized he hadn't just earned love. He'd rebuilt it from the ground up. The scent of cedar drifted through the crisp morning air as Ford stepped out of Nolan Fix and Restore, locking the newly installed glass doors. A soft breeze rustled the sidewalk banners fluttering above the shop's grand opening sign, still proudly hanging a month after the event. The storefront looked nothing like it had when he first saw it. The cracked tile had been replaced with warm hardwood, the walls painted a rich navy, and the shelves neatly lined with restored tools and handmade wooden pieces for sale. A bell chimed behind him, and he turned to see Thea approaching with 2 coffees in hand. You're going to be late, she said, pressing a warm cup into his palm. I haven't been late once since I met you, he said, taking a sip. But I appreciate the caffeine insurance. She looped her arm through his. I just like having an excuse to see you before the day starts. They crossed the street together, heading toward the community center where Ford had been invited to lead a workshop for local teens interested in trades. The program had grown faster than he expected. 6 apprentices now came to the shop after school, learning everything from rewiring lamps to rebuilding drawer tracks. Some had never held a screwdriver before their first lesson. You're sure you don't need me to check in with Bray? She asked, glancing at the time. He's with my neighbor until you're done with your meeting, Ford said. You've got your own big day. Thea sighed. It's not exactly thrilling. Just a quarterly review with the board. Ford nudged her gently. You're the only person I know who can say quarterly review and still look like a movie star. She laughed. Flattery won't get you out of dinner with my father tonight. He groaned lightly. I forgot that was tonight. You'll survive. He already likes you. Because I fixed his espresso machine. Exactly. You're indispensable now. They parted ways with a quiet kiss, one that lingered just a second longer than necessary before Ford jogged up the steps of the center. The afternoon passed in a blur of sawdust and soldering, his students eager and full of questions. He found himself pausing more than once to marvel at how far things had come. From borrowing tools he couldn't afford to now teaching others how to use them, it felt like a lifetime compressed into months. That evening, he stood in front of his closet wearing his only blazer and trying to remember which fork went with which course. When Thea returned from her meeting, she found him tugging at his shirt collar like it was strangling him. "You look fine," she said, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "I look like a guy about to be interrogated by a man who once owned a yacht called Liquidity." She snorted. "That yacht sank, actually, off the Amalfi Coast. He never talks about it." "Well, that's comforting." She turned him gently, smoothing the front of his jacket. "He'll see what I see. A man who shows up, who's raising a son with integrity, who built something from nothing. That's more impressive than any hedge fund resume." He kissed her forehead. "You always know what to say." "That's because I always mean it." Dinner was less terrifying than Ford expected. Thea's father, sharp-suited and silver-haired, asked thoughtful questions and listened with quiet intensity. By dessert, he was smiling at one of Bray's jokes and shaking Ford's hand with genuine warmth. "You're grounded," he said simply. "That's rare." On the way home, Thea reached for Ford's hand across the console. "So," she said, "I've been thinking. That sounds dangerous. I want to step back from the firm. Not quit, just reduce my hours. Focus more on the foundation. On projects that actually mean something." He looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure?" "I've been sure for a while. I just didn't know how to say it. But watching you build something real, it reminded me what I want." He pulled the car to a gentle stop outside their home. "You know, whatever you choose, I'm with you." "I know," she whispered, smiling. That weekend, they hosted a community event at the shop. Bray ran a kids' booth teaching simple repairs, while Ford and his apprentices demonstrated techniques for maintaining household items. Thea floated between stations, clipboard in hand, coordinating volunteers and chatting with city council members about expanding the program. As the crowd thinned and the sun dipped low, Ford stood beside her, their fingers intertwined. "This is the part one didn't expect," he said. "What part?" "That it wouldn't just be about fixing things. That I'd find someone who made me feel like I was worth building with." She turned toward him. "You didn't just fix my sink, Ford. You fixed the part of me that didn't believe in real love anymore." He kissed her then, right there under the string lights, with Bray clapping dramatically in the background and someone cheering from the food truck line. 3 months later, Ford stood barefoot on a wraparound porch, the one from the house he once trimmed hedges in front of, and watched as Bray raced across the backyard with a kite. Thea stepped out, a glass of lemonade in one hand and a small envelope in the other. "There's something you need to see," she said, handing it to him. He opened it slowly, frowning at the ornate letterhead. "What is this?" "Our wedding permit," she said, grinning. "I filed it this morning." He blinked. "You're proposing to me?" "No," she said, slipping her hand into his. "I'm informing you. You already proposed when you gave me a life I didn't know I needed." He stared at her, then down at the paper, then back at her again. "You're really sure?" She leaned in, her voice low. "I've never been more certain." 6 weeks later, they were married in the same field where they once roasted marshmallows and watched Bray chase fireflies. The ceremony was small, just family, friends, and the apprentices who'd become like nephews to Ford. Bray stood proudly beside them as best man, beaming in his tiny suit. As they exchanged vows under a canopy of wildflowers and the sun dipped behind the hills, Ford looked into Thea's eyes and saw not just the woman who'd taken a chance on him, but the life they'd built, sturdy, real, and completely their own. And when they danced barefoot under the stars, surrounded by everyone who mattered, there was no doubt in either of their hearts they had finally, completely found home.